Hi, welcome! This is lesson 7 and is about color. However, this time it will take longer to explain this lesson and also my work system since each artist works in a different way. In my case, I'm a mess, I'm very disorganized, so that's why I discovered not long time ago that working on a single layer is the best option for me. Perhaps you prefer working with individual layers. The key here is practicing because it will help you find the best way for you. Right now, I'm using the eyedropper to select the area of the background to create a uniform spot. Now we are going to use a Gaussian blur to obtain a background similar to the reference image. This will save us a lot of work and let us get a powerful final image. I'll be adding different colors to the same layer. This color for the skin, for instance, then this one over here for the clothing. So, okay, the dress is almost done. So I'm basically using the eyedropper in here, but it would depend on which palette of color we are using. So what I'm doing now is adding a base color to the whole drawing. Guys, you need to be very careful and make sure there aren't unwanted spots in areas outside the actual drawing. So, after finishing this step, I recommend you look carefully and check, especially in the outlines of it, that there is no extra color outside the drawing. So guys, coloring is just filling in the illustration. It's very easy. As you can see, she has curly hair, quite messy, and I want to reflect it in the illustration. However, I leave it like that for the moment, since right now I'm just working with flat colors. Well, as you might have noticed, I'm not following exactly the color palette of the reference image. And it happens sometimes. Although you're working with a reference, you're not supposed to reproduce it faithfully. That's up to us. We can decide if we want to follow it or if we prefer improvising using another color we think might set well on the drawing. So it is us who decides, as I said. What I'm doing now is inserting shadows all over the drawing to add volume. Well, in this case, I'm turning to the reference image to put them in the same place. And in this particular occasion, reference proved to be a good resource. The good thing here is that the light source is already given in the real picture, so we only need to copy it. So guys, I'm working with two specific brushes, which are the pencil brush and the other for spots. These are preset brushes of Photoshop, which I've been using over and over and over again in all of my courses for TutePad. And now the next step will be adding lighting effects. This tool you can see here is a really cool tool of Photoshop called Liquify, which can be selected to modify the drawing and to narrow or widen certain areas. It's really cool. Okay. So let's continue coloring and adding volume to the hair. It's true that coloring might be a bit tiresome, especially during the first steps, since it's just a draft and colors spots everywhere at the beginning. So it's not until it's almost finished that we can see a clear shape. I would recommend you create gradients with brushes and play around with the opacity and flow. And for those of you having Photoshop CC 2018, it would be great if you use the smooth tool to slow down the mouse speed, especially if you have a steady hand, as I do. We could set it at 7, 8, 9, or even 10 if we want it to be really slow. This is a tool that many people, the majority, use to add steady strokes. Or let's say you want to insert a curve. With this tool, the curve will be cleaner. And this is something I really like of this new version of Photoshop because it has helped me a lot. Well, I haven't stopped adding shadows during this time. Okay, what I've done now is grouping all the layers by pressing Ctrl E, and now I'm working on a single layer. Well, because this is me, basically. Okay, let's remind you that you're not forced to work in this way. You need to be comfortable with your work system. Perhaps you prefer working with several layers to color each area individually, the dress in one layer, the hair in another, the dress, and so on. From a point of view, working with a single layer seems to me like a traditional painting, as it were an oil or acrylic painting, or if we were using tempera. And this technique allows me to focus on the result depending on the brush's intensity, the mixing different tones, brush's opacity, and so on. I must confess that at the beginning I found it impossible, but then I became familiar with it and it's how I prefer working now. I wasn't happy with my previous results, so I tried out something different and it worked out, so keep trying out. Now I'm using a white zone to add light to certain areas and thus add intensity to the final result. So you can see, I'm kind of ignoring the left eye because my purpose is, if you remember what I told you at the beginning of the course, duplicating the right eye and placing it on the left. But I'll do it afterwards. Right now, I'm focusing on contrasting between light and dark colors and using brushes with different sizes and pressure. Remember that it's all these elements together what will determine if the result is good or not. So have a look at it. This is what I meant about duplicating the eye. Although it doesn't need to be symmetric. Okay, let's move the pupil because it seems that she's looking somewhere else, don't know where. And well, I knew that I just keep repeating it over and over again, but it's a slow process. And the good thing when working with a digital software is that we can create all the copies we need. We can even print it a million times if we want to. So this is a good thing. We also need to keep in mind the color mode we are working with. In my case, as my drawing is intended for digital purposes, I'm using a squared format in RGB. Although I will use my drawings for the internet and a high resolution isn't required, I usually work with 150 pixels per inch, which is the average dimension. since it lets me include details that the 32 one doesn't. So if you want to do the same, follow these steps. Open a 2000 by 2000 pixel file, reduce it to 150 pixel per inch, and RGB format. In case you want to compress the file, use a A4 format or even a A3 or A5. With CMYK color modes activated, then instead of 150, turn it to 300. So guys, this lesson on color is over. See you in the next lesson where we'll be adding the final details. Yes, see you!